Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today we continue with the compilation videos which are aimed at people who are working or people who are driving or people who just have a heck of a lot of time and want something on in the background. Today's compilation is our last 5 ProRevenge videos all in one place. Let's jump right in. Our first story today comes to us from Ray Rex. A-hole tailgates me when I'm already speeding, so I set them up for a speed trap. Let's jump right in. I was driving home from a get-together and was going 65 to 67 kilometers per hour in a 60 kilometer per hour zone. Where I'm from, the police almost never pull you over if you're going 10 over or less, but will definitely pull you over for anything over that. All was well until I got closer to my area. It's less city-like and more rural, with the roads alternating between single and double lanes. I'm on a single lane speeding 10 kilometers per hour over when a pickup truck in my rear view caught my attention. They were going a tad bit faster when they caught up to me and promptly braked a meter behind me. I was like, okay, I'll speed up to 70, no big deal, but they continued to tailgate me. Upon closer inspection, I could see the mug of a very angry woman who had no understanding of personal space. What ensued was a full 5 minutes of them completely obscuring my rearview mirror with how close they were. I was tired and kind of hungover, so I really was not in the mood to be worrying about a potential car accident thanks to her driving. I was going to pull over to let her go around when Waze gave me a heads up that a police officer was reported up ahead. This was when I decided I'm gonna dole out some karma. I slowly dropped my speed from 70 to 60, now at the speed limit. This woman was furious. Why she just didn't pass me, I'll never know, but she was literally going slightly over the midline, yelling to herself in my rear view, flashing her full brights in a weird show-offish way to get me to go faster. I did this for another minute before Waze showed the cop was less than a kilometer away. I put on my turn signal, very slowly pulled over, and watched this woman flip me the bird as she whipped past me, disappearing over the hill, now going way faster than 10 kilometers per hour over. I continued on my way, getting up to 70 kilometers per hour when I cleared the hill to see flashing lights ahead. Jackpot! I drove with anticipation until I got close enough to confirm it was my friend from earlier. Not wanting to miss out on hitting her with our new secret greeting, I dropped down to 60 kilometers per hour, peered over, and flashed the bird back at her. I hope you enjoy the ticket, Karen. Ah yes, the tailgater. These are the kinds of people that I love to play around with. If I'm already 10 clicks over the speed limit and you're right up my butt, I'm gonna slow right down to the speed limit, but only when I'm in a no passing zone. As soon as I hit that passing zone, I'm going 15 clicks over, you better believe it. That person is getting stuck behind me for as long as I possibly can. Ha! Our next story today comes to us from The Mung. I warned you not to park here. Let's jump right in. This all happened when I was a young man around 21 years old. I was sharing a flat with another young bloke in a Perth suburb, Australia. I had not long had my first car, an old 1972 beat-up old Ford Falcon, you know, base model, slightly rusted, air-conditioned floor, etc. I'm 50 now, so quite a long time ago. I loved my old Ford. It was roomy, comfortable, and reliable. As part of the large block of flats we lived in, each flat was given 2 parking spaces, one undercover and one open. My spot, clearly numbered with a 2 in a large white paint digit, was the open space. All was well for a few months. I was getting along really well with my flatmate, and we got along with our other neighbors. Enter entitled person. He drove a fairly new BMW, nice and flash. Whilst I was at work, he took it upon himself to allow himself to steal my spot. In Australia, the Ford Falcon was one of the largest cars on the road, and parking it was difficult. It would be classified as a mid-size in the USA. I get home, and my spot is occupied. Dang! Off I go to find someone else's spot to borrow for the night. I ask Unit 1 as I know they don't have a car, and they were quite accommodating to me. Still, I go inside and write a note for the owner of the BMW and neatly place it under his windscreen wiper, hoping that a polite request would do the trick. Nope. Next day, same thing. Now I'm getting a little irritated. I repeated the previous night's efforts, but made the note bigger and a tad ruder. I know he got the message because the bits of paper were gone. Day 3, same again. It's the weekend. Unit 1 couldn't lend me their spot as they had visitors. Okay, fair enough. I parked my big old Falcon across the front of the BMW, blocking it in. I wasn't going anywhere that weekend. Next morning, BMW was gone. Somehow it managed to slip the coupe. I steal my spot back again. That evening, the BMW did to me what I did to him, blocking me in. I see red. Upset me is not nice me. I'm patient, I bide my time. Monday morning, he's gone, and I go to work. Monday evening, yep, you guessed it, spot taken again. Fair dinkum, does this guy think he owns the spot? Revenge mode. New note on a sheet of A4 paper written on his windscreen with a big black texta, the kind that goes through the page. Full sheet is stuck to his windscreen with that horrible masking tape that always leaves something behind when it's peeled off. Next day, note gone and BMW still in my spot. Okay. Same again with the note, rude to the extreme, kindly explaining to the BMW why in the 7 dark levels of hell he shouldn't park in someone else's spot. Maybe even referring to his dubious parentage. I then get out the big gun, my silicone gel. I used the entire tube, plastering every last square millimeter of the page, and stuck it to his windscreen, right in front of where his eyes would look through at the road. Try ignoring that. When I go to leave for work the next morning, the BMW is gone, nowhere to be seen. I saw it further down the car park a couple of days later with a brand new windscreen. Needless to say, he never parked in my spot again. In fact, neither did anyone else ever. Now, OP added an edit onto this story. It says, "To all you readers who are wondering why I just didn't get him towed, here's why. Think about it. I was young and naive at the time and didn't even think about towage. Now, different story. Then, I just wanted him to go away and leave me alone. I wasn't even aware at the time I could. So, horses for courses. The time was the early 90s. I was in my early 20s, skinny and not particularly strong, and with no idea on how to fight. I only had my intellect. The guy pissed me off. I didn't know which unit he was in, never saw him at any time, nor did he approach me when it was obvious which unit I was in. I started off being polite and progressed gradually downwards from there, culminating in the final offensive. Context: I got what I wanted. He was sorely inconvenienced and seriously embarrassed publicly for the entire large block of flats to see. Everybody would have passed him, and the plastered note on his now unusable car. Plus, since nobody would help me, I had to help myself, and of course, warn them all not to mess with the weakling from flat number 2. Having him towed would have produced less humiliation, as he could have merely shrugged it off as a broken down car. It worked. It's interesting that the BMW driver kept on doing this because, if somebody's driving a really crappy car, one that looks like it's falling apart and probably isn't worth very much, they might not be so concerned if you retaliate, so they're gonna damage your expensive crap. Our next story today comes to us from a deleted account. Sexist jerk loses grant and doesn't know why. I do. Let's jump right in. I am an early career academic in a small niche field. I'm going to fudge the details on some of this because the field is so small. As I said, I'm an early career academic in a small field. Right out of grad school, I was able to get a very prestigious fellowship at a very prestigious institution. I was thrilled and I went into my first day ready to work my butt off for the 2 term. The head of the department, I'll call him John, seemed nice enough on the first day, but it quickly became clear that he was an incompetent and sexist bully. A quick summary of with him: any woman that worked with him was called sweetheart when he was in a good mood and girly when he was in a bad mood. 2, he refused to give me 2 days off to attend my uncle's funeral. The 2 men who worked under him were both allowed 2-week vacations over the year because they were working hard. None of the women were allowed vacations or time off for any reason. 3, if he didn't like you, he would change the requirements of a task at the last minute. I work in a field that sometimes requires pretty high security clearance, With 2 days' notice, he demands that one of his friends be able to come to an event I had organized that required security clearance to get into the building. His friend was not an American citizen, making security nearly impossible, particularly on that timeline. Instead of listening to reason, he tried to dock my pay in retaliation. I was able to get that denied through HR. 4. Speaking of pay, he frequently forgot to pay all of us and tried to force one of the other female fellows to handle all his HR issues. As it wasn't a part of the fellowship to handle admin issues, she refused, which led to some serious temper tantrums on his part. So I think you get the picture. It was bad. Bad enough, in fact, that the institution hired an outside consulting company to investigate what was happening in the department. At first, I was very hopeful and thought maybe the situation would get fixed. However, the consulting company also had expertise in this small academic field, and it turns out that the CEO of the company was an old friend of John. I quickly realized that the investigation would go nowhere. Also at the same time, John was applying for a $1 million grant. This grant is a bit different than most others because it's a community-chosen awardee. There is a grant committee and all members of the committee are nominated by people in the field. The committee then chooses who deserves this grant. Although the grant is considered medium-sized for the field, it is very prestigious. Importantly, the members of the committee are public. Knowing that the investigation was going to go nowhere, and knowing the names of all members on the committee, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I had a decent travel stipend as part of the fellowship, so I planned from then on out to only attend conferences where a committee member lived. This way, he had to pay for me to go. I then would go to these cities and get in touch with committee members. Because it is a small field, it isn't uncommon to schedule informal get-togethers with people in the field even if you don't know them personally. So I spent a lot of time traveling, which ended up being great for my career anyway, and talking to all sorts of people in the field. I'd offer to buy them a beer in exchange for asking them questions about their careers. Through these casual conversations, I'd ask them about personality conflicts in the lab and how they had handled them. I never mentioned John by name, but by the end of the chat, it would be obvious who I was talking about and that the issues were serious. I also made sure to talk about Jane, a woman in the field, and how amazing it has been to watch her short but fast-moving career. I realized that all of this was pretty subtle, but I hope that these little seeds would impact the committee's decision. The grant decision was announced 2 weeks after I had finished my fellowship. At this point, I assumed he was still going to get it because that is what the grapevine was saying. Academics are so gossipy. But I got a call from another former fellow. The grant went to Jane. The committee cited her short but impactful career. Apparently, John was so upset he broke his own laptop by throwing it across the room. 3 years later, he still mentions at conferences how Jane never deserved the grant and how he doesn't understand how he lost it. It honestly threw me off in this one when I read that he called his female coworkers girly when he was upset, because that's what I call my kids. I have 3 daughters in my house here with me, and whenever I go to bed, it's "Good night, girlies." I guess it's not quite the same, but it made me look twice. Our next story today comes from another deleted account. Cheat on my dad, I ruin your life. Let's jump right in. So a little over a week ago, I caught my dad's adulterous wife at a hotel pool with a man I'll call Steroid Douche, or SD for short. Guess what they were doing? Hint, not swimming. So she and Steroid Douche have some history. About a year ago, she left my dad for Steroid Douche. This was just a mere 6 months after my father married her, so my dad let her go and started the divorce stuff. Unfortunately, she came crawling back to him before the divorce could happen. She claimed Steroid Douche beat her. Steroid Douche doesn't love her. She made a mistake, so my dumb dad takes her back. Now here she is, only 4 months later, playing tonsil hockey with Steroid Douche at a hotel pool when she should be at her office working. She didn't see my husband and I, so we took some super sweet pics and slipped out of there. I'm not gonna lie, I was super pissed. I was going to send the pics off to my dad right then and there. However, hubby and I decided that there was more that could and should be done. Now, I'll try to keep this brief, but there's something I need to add. My dad has supported this woman and her children for years, and she is not a cheap woman to have around. She has only very recently gotten herself a job, a very nice one in fact. She is actually in the process of owning about 1/3 of the business. My sisters and I have speculated that this recent success might be because of extramarital activities with the fairly wealthy recently divorced business owner who spontaneously took my dad's wife under his wing. I'll call the business owner B.O. Now, I had no proof that she was cheating on my dad with business owner, only steroid douche. However, I figured it wouldn't hurt to reach out to business owner with my findings to see how he would react. Since she was supposed to be at work, she must have called off, so I called her office. Hi, this is OP. I'm calling about adulterous wife. Is business owner there? I should mention my dad's wife pretended to be a loving stepmom. She's not. Well, that also meant pretending to have a hard but endearing relationship with me. In fact, her office is plastered in pics from my Facebook of myself and my family. So people in her office know who I am and didn't have any issue with transferring me to business owner. Hi OP, is everything okay with adulterous wife? Well, kind of, it depends. How close are you really with my dad's wife? Excuse me? He totally stammered. Never mind, look, I'm gonna be straight with you. Adulterous wife is out with steroid douche when she should be there working. Silence. Hello? Why should I believe you? All you've done is lie about adulterous wife. Yeah, my dad's wife is a permanent victim. I'll send you some pics I took. Here's my email address. I send the pics and get no response. I decide to call Steroid Douche's gym, which is also my gym. There's been a pretty awful rumor going around about Steroid Douche. Apparently, he's been selling steroids to fellow gym members. So I told them Steroid Douche tried to sell me steroids there last week. This was a lie. I told them I didn't feel safe going there anymore, so I'd like to cancel my membership. They asked if I was going to go to the police and file a report. I told them no, that Steroid Douche was prone to anger and I didn't want to risk retaliation. They understood. Membership canceled. I know this seems irrelevant, but this gym takes these kinds of things seriously, especially when complaints result in an end of a membership. At the very least, they will be looking to cancel his membership too. So then finally, after all that, I send my dad the pics I took of his wife with a long drawn out message about support and love and whatnot. Now to the good part. It's been a week since I saw what I saw and did what I did. Here are the results of my half-butt sabotage. 1. Adulterous wifey lost her job and any chance at being a co-owner. Business owner trashed her crap in the office and actually made a huge scene, which led to a pretty nasty, heavily detailed review on a local Facebook rant page from a customer that was in the establishment. Our town is pretty small, so a review like that can be a bit damaging, and because of the contents, it really hurt adulterous wifey's image. Someone even shared a story about her husband having an affair with my dad's wife 3 years ago at her last job. Wouldn't you know it, Steroid Douche had rented out a locker at the gym. Since the waiver you sign to rent a locker allows the gym to open your locker whenever they feel necessary, Steroid Douche ended up getting his locker searched. What they found in the locker, according to the police blotter, was a freaking unregistered pew-pew. So poor Steroid Douche is going to prison, probably. Yeah, seriously, great way to BS myself into a win. Did I mention he's a felon? Haha, you can guess how that worked out for him. Bye-bye. My dad's wife is now living in a hotel. Between the pics, business owner firing her, and then Steroid Douche being sent away, my dad threw her butt out. She is super upset about Steroid Douche, hysterical to be more precise. She refuses to come see her kids, who are still living with my dad. My dad is being civil and trying to keep everything super calm for them. She doesn't seem to care about my dad or the kids at all though. She did give me a call, I let it go to voicemail. I couldn't really make out what she said, but between the shrieks and sobbing I caught, "I'm gonna kill you," and "You ruined my life." I might get a restraining order, I don't know yet. I'm kinda giddy about this. My dad will hopefully start being happier. Wait. So I know there's a whole big story here, but there's one thing that's just, it's weighing on my mind. You're telling me that you were able to cancel a fitness club membership over the phone? How? You're like a god. Our next story today comes to us from Link Hanford. Ruin my summer? Enjoy not going to university. Let's jump right in. This was a little over 10 years ago in my early 20s, but it's still one of my favorite stories of karma that suited well to my revenge. As a teenager, I got a part-time job as a lifeguard at the biggest pool in the city, if not the province. I was a hard worker, and over the years, I had every certification I could get. Over the summers, I'd often work on nearby beaches. One year, these rural beaches had a really hard time keeping staff, so they'd ask people from my pool to work there. It just so happened my parents had a cottage on one of the beaches, and I said, hey, I'd be interested in working at Middle of Nowhere Beach. It'd be peaceful, and I can come home on weekends if I want. I took the job, about 4 hours away from home for a 10-week contract. I was a lifeguard instructor trainer. I certified people to teach other people how to train lifeguards. At the time of this story, I was one of the youngest to have this certification. Most of my coworkers were going into their second year of working on this beach, and frankly, second year of being a lifeguard. It was going to be my first year working in this area. Basically, the head manager told me, look, it's your first time working out here. We need someone with your experience. We can't give you beach captain position on paper, but we are willing to pay you at a beach captain rate, plus extra for your certifications. And you can fill in as beach captain on days when the others can't. As far as we're concerned, you're an alternate. We just don't want to upset the locals more than we need to. Be advised though, you may need to work at a few other beaches out and around there. More pay, fewer responsibilities. Yeah, I guess I can take this one for the team. Here's what you need to know about this place. The area is naturally beautiful. This is one of the best drives on the continent. One of the top 10 islands in the world. Mountains to the left, endless ocean to the right, beaches everywhere. It's also one of the poorest parts of the country, and some communities have a mob mentality when outsiders come to work here. For the most part, my coworkers liked me and appreciated my experience, except for the one beach captain we'll call Maggie. Everyone employed goes to a training camp retreat. District managers go for 5 days, beach captains go for 4 days, and general staff goes for 3 days. I was only asked to show up for the general staff, did my thing, met my new coworkers. Maggie rubs me the wrong way and started calling me rookie, and then she left. Turns out she was graduating high school and had prom to attend. She didn't want to do the rest of the training because of all the after prom parties. Okay, that's weird. I'm waking up at 7 a.m. to do a 10-kilometer run with everyone before breakfast, and you're passed out after a night of drinking. I'm annoyed, but if I could pull it off, I might do the same, no biggie. How could she pull off getting out of a mandatory training, you ask? She's a family legacy. Once upon a time, her mom was the beach captain, and now runs the local pool in the middle of nowhere. If you were certified as a lifeguard around here, you had to go through her. Maggie's sister was the beach captain, then district manager, and recently retired from the service and went to nursing school. Maggie was the next in line to do this. She was going to be awarded a scholarship through the lifeguard service for her school of choice. At the end of the summer, there's an AGM where they make all these announcements, but it was a well-known secret. Day 1 of the summer on the beach starts. We're setting up the beach. It's a half day, not many patrons around. We organize first aid kits, equipment, set up our hut, test the phones, etc. District manager, a local, arrives to inspect everything. He's happy, he's a buddy of mine, and as we're the last stop of his beaches to inspect, he hangs out with us. Day's up, and Maggie's mother shows up and tells her to start packing up for the swimming instructors symposium. Turns out, Maggie is leaving tomorrow for the Dominican Republic on her pool's dime for 3 weeks. That's 30% of the lifeguard season. She actually tells me, "See you in 3 weeks, rookie," and leaves. The district manager and I drop our jaws and wonder, WTF, why is this only coming out now? I help him out. We sit down and come up with a new schedule for the next 3 weeks. My supervisor filled in some of her shifts, and we even worked together a few times. Now, looks like I have to be a beach captain with the actual new guards at least 3 weeks. It was more work for me, but honestly, Maggie's departure was a blessing. I've hardly met her, but I doubt we're going to get along. She rubs me the wrong way. Those 3 weeks without her, I got a great feng shui, zen groove, and inner harmony thing going on. It was the healthiest mentally and physically I've been in my life. Of course, the lack of negative emotions directed toward me would not last. It ended the day Maggie returned, literally within the first hour of us working together. Maggie, my beach captain, started our day together by berating me in front of her friends. "Hey rookie, do you even know how to do CPR? I was watching you at training camp and you were doing it wrong. I need you to show me how to do it right now." You want me to show you how to do CPR? Sure, no problem. Could ask nicer, but whatever, I'll put up with this. We have to practice so much every day anyway. Then she drops this bit of information while I practice incorrectly. "If you don't have anything under them, you'll dig a hole in the sand." Maggie, this doesn't make sense, but whatever. It's not like I'm an instructor in this or anything, or have basic knowledge of physics, that pushing on sand isn't the same thing as digging. The whole day consisted of Maggie calling me rookie and being pointlessly rude in her critiques of my life-saving skills. Of course, it wouldn't be a good work story unless someone stole someone's lunch. "Hey Maggie, is that my lunch in your mouth right now?" "Oh, was that your lunchbox?" "Well, it wasn't your lunchbox, was it?" I'm the beach captain. You can't talk to me like that." This would become our daily routine on our shifts together. I began packing a decoy lunch with half-eaten items or empty wrappers. This gave me the opportunity to hide and eat my real lunch without her bothering me. By week 4, it's our mid-season evaluation. There's 2 parts, physical evaluation and professional evaluation. District manager does the physical and it's straightforward. All employees show up at the beach before it opens. You run 4 kilometers, swim 600 meters, paddle 2 kilometers, etc. Apparently, I embarrassed Maggie. I was the most improved from start of the season to the end of the season. I was already in the top 25%, but now I was physically one of the top 5%. Maggie, however, got worse. A lot worse. She was mediocre, but in the general top 50%, but was now one of the worst physical guards, bottom 10%. Her times all were substantially lower. But luckily for her, it's not all physical. There's still the professional evaluation. The beach captain who works with you the most writes up your evaluation. You get a score out of 50. 10 5-point characteristics: punctual, customer service, safety, etc. You get graded and short notes are written to explain your score. At the bottom, there's a recommendation section on what to do or work on. One of the other beach captains who tolerated Maggie wrote her evaluation and it wasn't all bad. Of course, Maggie was the one who wrote my evaluation, despite only working with me a few times. I don't get to see it, which is normal, and when it's done, she passes it in to the bosses. Once it's handed in, the district manager pulls Maggie and I aside. He rips it up in front of us and says, "Maggie, this isn't a real evaluation. You gave him all zeros. Your notes are incoherent, and in the recommendation section, you told him to leave and never come back. This is not acceptable. I've worked with him more than you did. I'm gonna write up the mid-season evaluation." Maggie breaks down in tears, plays the victim that the outsider is taking her job, and she's protecting herself. Manager's not buying it, but ultimately goes easier on her. Temper's cool. I get a modest review with things to improve on. Right away, I knew this would happen again, and I'd need to make notes to defend myself. I have a reputation in the life-saving community I'd like to keep. Things got weirder after this. Aside from umpteen mentions of calling me rookie against my wishes, my notebook was getting filled with some highlights, including she stole my rooster ketchup with a green top and lathered her hot dog only to get upset with me. She wrote me up for poisoning her with hot sauce, though she really stole my sriracha. She took her top off in front of me and in full view of kids cause she had to air out the girls. Went on a walking patrol down the beach for 2 hours, only to end up hanging out with her friends, drinking on the beach, and having a fire. Double no-no. Called her dealer to deliver joints to her while on guard, not even discreetly. I taught the junior guard some basic stuff. Once the class is over, she goes up to the parents and tells them I taught all the wrong things and it's actually done this way instead. On a particularly bad day, She berated the middle-aged gentleman with Down syndrome who normally brings treats to her because he didn't bring any treats on this day. Things were cartoonishly stupid. Why would someone act this way? Turns out she was also bashing me to the other guards. They'd regularly inform me of stuff like this. Hey, just so you know, Maggie told me you hit someone's car with a hammer. Obviously you didn't, but heads up, she's telling locals about it. What did I get myself into? This is ridiculous. My summer paradise at the most beautiful place on earth is ruined by a succubus leeching off of inner peace. I was at my end. This isn't worth it. I want to go home. I'm belittled by an entitled brat, and I don't need this as much as they need me. I'm going to sleep it off, think with a clear head in the morning. Note, this place is a sleepy beach town. It's heavily wooded and not many cell towers. Reception isn't great. Also, it's a hot summer. I live alone. I hate pants. When I'm home, I'm probably naked. And the lock on the door isn't great. It works, but with a bit of effort, you can get past it. We basically put an exterior padlock on the door when we're away for extended periods. But hey, no one knows anyone's living here, right? Who's gonna come bother me in the middle of nowhere? 5:30 a.m. Bam, bam, bam. Huh? What's happening? Bam, bam, bam. Creak. OP, answer your phone. I've been calling you all night. Why are you naked? That's gross. You have to work at the beach further away today. I've got an appointment I've had scheduled for months and can't change it. You need to go there or I won't be back in time. Wait, what's going on? Why is she in my house right now? I thought to myself as I startled and jumped up, covering myself with whatever I could find. I raised my temper and got her out of my home as quickly as possible and say to myself, that's it, I'm done, this isn't worth it. I call my district manager, tell him the rundown of what's been happening lately. Initially, he thought I might be embellishing the truth a bit because it's all so ridiculous. He tells me if I go to work, there's 2 weeks left in the contract, he'll make sure Maggie and I don't work together anymore as long as I can stick around. Later on, I'm begrudgingly working at the further away beach and we get a call. It's the district manager. OP, I owe you an apology. I thought you were making this stuff up. Maggie just called to report you for being naked and yelling at her. As she explained this, she admitted to walking into your home. What do you want to do about this? District manager, which beach captain or alternate has worked with Maggie the most this summer? Oh, looks like it's you by a fair bit. Is she allowed to do my end of season evaluation? No, because of what she did with your mid-season, we've decided that I would do it personally again. Okay, great. Who gets to do hers then? Well, you can guess where this ended up. As luck would have it, Maggie and I got to work together once more due to someone being sick. The whole time she's telling me, I'm gonna make your review so bad, you're gonna wish you never came here, rookie. At that point, I just smiled with a crap-eating grin. The summer may have its last dawn, but this will be the end of you, Maggie. Writing up Maggie's end-of-season evaluation was between the supervisor and I. The rest of the staff were unaware of this, so I used the final days talking to the staff. What's the weirdest thing Maggie did to you this summer? Here's the highlights. Stole the pretty boy guard's car keys at the end of the day to keep him around because she was flirting with him. He had to go right to the hospital to visit his mom. Gradually through the course of a day, she spiked the 16 guard's work water bottle with vodka. He'd never been drunk before and had to drive home. After hours, she went to a lifeguard girls' night out and skipped out on the bill. No, she wasn't invited again after that. I'm composing her end-of-season evaluation. I'm smart about it. I grade reasonably well with things. To her credit, she was good at. She improved her swimming skills, which is something after all. But everything else, I avoid grading a 1 as much as possible to avoid looking like I'm purposely out to get her. More than just grading, I'm providing written documentation to back this up. I've got my journal of hellish Maggie moments, my coworkers' experiences with her, and I've been smart enough to make copies of our notes from patrons with her mentioned. But the coup de grace, recommendations for next season. Recommended not to re-offer beach captain or alternate beach captain position next season. Recommended awarding scholarship to someone else in the service. Not long after this gets submitted, I get a call from the head boss, senior manager, who hasn't been made privy to Maggie and I's situation. OP, I've known you for a few years. I'm reading Maggie's end of season evaluation, and there are some serious allegations here. Her family will likely rebuke this and make it a problem for my office. Not giving her this scholarship sounds harsh. Do you have any documentation to back up any of this? Do you really think she deserves this? Well, sir, that's ultimately up to you. Here are notes and times from the entire team. Feel free to call any of them. Here's the footage from my trail cam of her breaking into my home at 5:30 in the morning. Here's the contact info for the Down syndrome gentleman whom she berated. Here's the report patrons have made about her. Oh, this is bad. Well, thanks for being so thorough with this. Epilogue. Well, word got to her she wouldn't be receiving her scholarship. Instead, it went to an incredibly nice and hard worker in another district. Maggie's mom complained for a while about come from a ways taking all the jobs, but then she heard how Maggie treated the gentleman with Down syndrome. She may have been the town's princess, but that man was the salt of the earth and immune to any harsh treatment. Needless to say, Maggie didn't come to the AGM. The next year, I was knee-deep in my actual career and didn't re-enroll in the lifeguard service, but offered my services as a substitute. One of the guards I liked last year calls me to see if I can sub for them for a weekend. I decided I'll do it as long as Maggie isn't working. He laughs and says no, but she's on staff as a regular lifeguard. Well, Maggie wasn't working, but her cousin was. Uh-oh, this can't be good. Our first interaction was kind of amazing. Wait, are you OP? Yes. I prepare myself for a day of harassment. Oh man, you are awesome. Maggie and her mom hate you. They're so mean. Our family hates them. She's so entitled and makes us look bad. You're like a legend around here. Well, this is a change of pace from what I was expecting. We became friends over the course of the day, and she explains to me that Maggie thought her scholarship was a sure thing. Her mom pulled strings for her to get it, and it fell through. So she never saved any money for school. Maggie's plans of getting into nursing didn't work out. Maggie's mom took a lateral promotion in the life-saving world. That new position didn't last, and she was laid off only to go back to her old pool as the assistant to the person who took over her job. She wasn't able to pull any more strings after that. Last time I checked, Maggie went to community college and took a less expensive continuing care attendant course with the plan of eventually jumping over to nursing when she saved some money. Unfortunately for her, the instructors weren't crazy about her better than you attitude, and she was kicked out of the course sometime in second year. Last time I saw her, she was working at the summer ice cream stand by the beach I visited on a lovely vacation to one of the most beautiful places in the world. I don't understand how somebody that entitled can go into a nursing career. I mean, you have to actually care about other people, and she very clearly only cared about herself. Kinda glad she got kicked out of that program, cause could you imagine? The last thing I want to comment on this one is just how well written the story is. OP, you did a wonderful job. Our next story today comes to us from Major Moron 0851. Be a jerk about fixing my car. Hope you and your manager enjoy unemployment thanks to my dumb luck. Let's jump right in. Okay, so few things to start. I'm sorry this is long, but it's a lot of information to lay out the story. I think the revenge is pretty sweet though. Secondly, English is my first language, but I never did well with grammar. Sorry. Okay, so the story. In January 2018, my best friend, his girlfriend and I all went out. We took my car, but I got drunk, so my best friend drove us home. As we were approaching a roundabout, a driver from a side street pulled out in front of us, then slammed on their brakes, causing my best friend to swerve and hit the concrete median with both driver's side tires. We parked the car in a parking lot and Ubered home. Next day, I had the car towed to my personal mechanic shop. Insurance guy assesses the damage, and my mechanic gets to work. He does everything he thought it needed, putting it on the alignment rack, and found out that the engine cradle had been bent in the impact and it needed a new one. He didn't have the capability to do this, so they sent my car to a different company. Let's just call it ABC Repair. ABC Repair outsourced the engine cradle replacement to Dickweed Shop, aka DS. Car goes, takes forever because the first cradle they got was bent, so they had to order another one from California. Dude ordered the wrong parts originally. Dude gets the cradle in on the day my rental car coverage expires. As a single dad, I needed my car. Also, this whole time, the manager of ABC Repair Shop was not keeping me up to date on any of this, was dodging my calls, and anytime I did get him, he was rude to me. So, guy busts rear to get it in that day, test drove, and returned it to ABC Repair right before closing time, where I was waiting to pick it up. Dickweed Shop gave it a clean bill of health and handed over the keys. Here's where rude crap begins. So, the minute I left ABC Shop that night, there was something wrong with the car. Since I have a bit of auto mechanic experience, I assumed it was a wheel bearing. Next morning, I call my insurance adjuster, who tells me to take it back to Dickweed Shop and see what's up. So, I call him up and say, hey, it's the dude with the engine cradle job. I think there's something wrong with one of the bearings. Yeah, I knew about that. So why did you give it a clean bill of health? I was being rushed to return it, so I just said it was fine. It wasn't critical, so what's the big deal? Okay, well, we need this fixed. Are you sure you know exactly what's wrong? 100% right rear wheel bearing. Okay, I'll call the adjuster and get it approved for repair. I have no more rental coverage, but I am going out of town this weekend and will not need my car Thursday to Sunday. I can drop it off then, does that work? Sure, no problem, see you Thursday morning. Dickweed Shop orders the bearing with insurance approval and all is well. I go in Thursday morning to drop off the car, and the conversation goes roughly as follows. Hey there, here's the keys. Now, if it's actually not what you think it is, or there's more, please call me right away. I'll call the insurance adjuster and get it approved since this is the only time I don't need my car for transporting my child. No worries, I'm positive it's what I think it is, but if not, I'll call. I head out of town. Have a great weekend, no call from Dickweed Shop. Monday morning comes around, and I am about to head out to pick up the car when I get a phone call from my adjuster. He tells me he just got off the phone with Dickweed Shop, and he was informed that no work was done on my car all weekend. I was livid. I asked why, and insurance adjuster said he didn't know. Head down there and talk to the guys myself, so I did. I walked into the shop and dinged the bell. He walked into the office and said, "Can I help you?" as if he didn't even know who I was. Followed is the conversation. Yeah, insurance guy tells me you didn't touch my car. What the heck happened? Well, it was the right front, not the right rear bearing like I thought, so I couldn't do the work since the right front wasn't approved. But I asked you to call me if it wasn't what you thought it was, and you said you would. Why didn't you call? Well, who's paying for this, you or insurance? That doesn't matter. I asked you to call so I could get it approved while I was out of town. Why didn't you call me? I don't have to answer you. It wasn't the approved work. I didn't do it. End of story. Why didn't you call? I could have gotten it approved. Like I said before, I left for out of town. Dickweed Shop turns around, grabs my keys off the counter behind him, hands them to me and says, "Take your keys, take your car. I'm done dealing with you." I walked out pissed and across the street to his manager's office and asked to talk to the manager. On vacation until Wednesday. I'd leave my number and ask manager to call me. In the meantime, I get the car to the original mechanic who starts bearing repairs on all 4 tires. Approved by insurance as a "we're sorry" for Dickweed Shop experience. He also noticed that Dickweed Shop used the wrong strut in my car when he replaced the engine cradle and didn't put the rivets back in the plastic wheel well liner, causing the tire to burn a hole through it, which insurance approved replacing both with the correct parts. Manager finally calls me at 4:45 p.m. on Wednesday after being busy doing payroll all day. "So, do you know anything about why I'm calling you?" "No clue, what's going on?" Begins to explain what happened when I returned from out of town. Then state the strut was wrong and the liner was ruined. Interrupts me. He couldn't have ruined the liner by replacing the cradle. "Oh, so you do know who I am. What actually happened?" "I never mentioned engine cradle replacement." "Well, I'll apologize for wasting your time, but I don't know what else you want me to do. Sorry." He hangs up on me. The revenge. Remember that trip out of town? Well, on my return trip, I was bumped off my original flight, then bumped from that flight to the only one that finally took me home. I get on the plane, find my seat, put in my headphones and start to settle in. Now, mind you, I was out of town for a party, and I was wearing a themed onesie. A gentleman in a business suit sits down next to me. I'm naturally an outgoing person, so I strike up a conversation. Hey there, heading to destination for business or pleasure? Business. What do you do? I'm the regional vice president for ABC Repair Company. My eyes got huge. It was destiny. So I began to tell him my current experience up to me leaving for out of town. The butthole manager at his shop to the dickweed shop jerk they were subletting business to. VP was taking notes on my entire story. I swear his job was on the tray table. He was furious. He gave me his personal cell and email and told me he would be having a talk with the manager. He also had his company pay for 5 more days for a rental car since they ordered a used cradle and not a new one, which butthole manager decided didn't even ask my adjuster or me, which wasted 5 days. The next afternoon, after I pick up my car and had that experience, I got a call from VP. He wanted to make sure my car was fixed, and that he'd also found out there were more complaints about his manager who treated me poorly. The manager was hiding the complaints and they never reached corporate, so he was fired. I then tell him about my experience that morning with the guy not doing any work on my car while I was gone. That pissed him off too. He said he would be in touch. After I talked to Dickweed Shop manager on Wednesday, I called VP back and told him what happened. He said thank you for the information and hung up. About a month later, I had a question for VP not related to any of this, so I called him up, and I learned that they stopped giving their work to Dickweed Shop. And when the owner of Dickweed Shop found out why, he fired both Dickweed Shop mechanic and Dickweed Shop manager. So that's my story. Hope y'all enjoyed. Moral, don't be a douchebag, be honest, and you won't get bit by karma. So I've got to be honest, I don't normally swear in these videos, but this is too good to pass up. Did you notice in the story when the guy meant to say assess that it was written as asses? Insurance guy asses the damage. I just imagine some guy rubbing his butt all over the car with a quizzical look on his face. Damn it, Larry, it's assess, not rub your ass all over it. No wonder that didn't make any sense. Now put your pants back on and pray that no one else saw you. Our next story today comes to us from Chip on My Shoulder. Seriously upcharged a guy that upcharged my parents. Let's jump right in. My parents were renovating their house about a year ago, and they needed an electrician to move some lighting fixtures. Generally, I have a friend that's my go-to electrician for stuff like this, but my parents had hired a guy to paint the living room and needed this done quickly. My electrician friend happened to be on vacation, so he wouldn't be able to get out to me until after the painter was already scheduled to come. After referring with a couple of other friends, they recommended an electrician. We are all from the same country and happen to emigrate to the same small town, so people within our culture generally recommend other people from that same country. The electrician comes by for a quote. I've never met this individual, and he tells my parents that it's all based on the amount of time it would take and that he can't give them an exact quote because he doesn't know how much time it's going to take until the job is already started. My parents think this sounds reasonable and end up hiring him. Just as an A-side, I installed Nest cameras for my parents in their living room and facing their front door, so we had a good view of the area where the job was being performed. This job takes him about an hour, and he literally sat on my couch on his phone for about 5 hours, watching TV, kicking his feet up, waiting for my mom to get home so that he could show her the work is complete, and charge her like 6 hours for a job that took him about an hour, which I confirmed how unprofessional his behavior was on my Nest Cam. My parents didn't want to cause any friction, so they paid him for the amount of time he charged them. I believe it was like $500 for something that should have really cost $150 or so. Anyway, the lighting fixtures were installed, he received his check and went on his merry way. My electrician friend later confirmed that this guy had seriously upcharged my parents. A few months later, I decided to take a side gig selling solar as a 1099 employee. I was making decent money at my existing job, but I had a wide enough network where I could help people around me with generally good solar deals and make some good money for myself on the side. The company I connected with would give me my price on panels, including installation, as well as on the roof if a roofing job was required. My price was extremely good, and the way I made my money was by tacking on the fee at my end, built into the roof price and the per watt price of the panels, plus installation. Much like my parents found the electrician, this same electrician who I had never met found me, inquiring about a roofing job. I told him that I don't do standalone roofs, but that I could package something for him, including solar, which would get rid of most of his electricity bill. He said he didn't have the money up front for the roof or the panels, which is fine cause we can finance, and it started to sound like he was a little bit desperate as his roof was leaking and he didn't have the capital to fix it. Generally, when I go to a client, I try to keep the price down and make it more desirable for the client. I'd rather make less money than no money, so I generally make around $3,000 to $5,000 per install, which is a win-win. When I got the call, I thought the guy's name was familiar, and sure enough, it was the electrician who had helped my parents and left a bad taste in my mouth. At this point, I knew he was desperate for a resolution to his roof issue, and I knew he barely spoke any English, so my word was going to be gold. I set up an appointment to go meet up with him in about a week. I knew that I was going to upcharge the crap out of him due to the language barrier he would have with other installers, his desperation, and the fact that he upcharged my parents. I got the price quote from the installer that said the roof would cost about $10,000 for a strip and re-roof. This was a really good quote as the house was a multi-family unit and I was expecting the quote to come to around $15,000. They also gave me the price on the solar panels, which would be around $15,000. So the price I was looking at for the project was $25,000. Generally, in a good situation like this, I might have called in $29,000 total, got him a spectacular deal, make a couple grand and called it a day. But I was thinking, F this guy. So I adjusted the cost of the roof to $19,000 and the price of the panels to $21,000. Half expecting that I would eventually need to come down on the pricing at some point. I went over there to meet up with him, proposed his setup, told him how good the quality of the roofing job would be, which is accurate, and that the solar system would virtually wipe out his electricity bill, and that I would get him set up with a 25-year loan to keep his monthly payment down. He agreed to this, was excited to get his roof done, and really didn't care much about the panels. But they were part of the bundle and on we went. Once everything was installed, I was paid out on my deal and went to cash my $15,000 check. I went to my parents' house and gave them $1,500 each and explained to them what had happened and how I stumbled upon a $15,000 commission check. Just so it's clear, there is nothing shady about what I did. It was way more expensive than it needed to be and everything was disclosed to him properly. He just paid more than he would have had to, even if he simply shopped around. But at the end of the day, it's well within my rights to charge whatever I want, like it's within the rights of the customer to tell me to F off. A big chunk of what he paid is covered by incentives, but he still paid way more than typical. Moral of the story, especially for contractors, plumbers, electricians, and mechanics, don't F people, because you're more aware of how things work than they are in a particular field, because you might end up getting F'd later tenfold. Not the butthole, he deserved it. Oh wait, wrong subreddit. OP, the big difference between you and this guy is you asked for and got a very good price and you delivered with a good service. He sat on the couch and committed fraud. Big difference. I love how you went back and paid restitution to your parents. That is absolutely admirable. Our next story today comes to us from Cadavatar, the epic of the not-so-sexy librarian. Let's jump right in. I got a job at the local library in the summer of 2016. Strap in, kids, because in order for you all to understand the true artistry of my revenge, this is going to be a long, delicious ride. At this time, I was a poor undergrad student who had just gotten out of an abusive relationship and was riddled with anxiety. In my new living situation, I had to earn more money than I was making as a tutor in the college writing center, so I applied to work part-time as a shelver in the mornings before I would go to class. Now, I said local library, but it's actually a bit more complex. The library system I was working for was one of the best in its area of the United States. We had a dozen or so branches. The main branch of the library had a coffee shop, an indoor theater, and a sub-basement full of books, along with a suspiciously well-kept underground bunker full of important state documents. I worked at a branch, and it was considered one of the larger branches, the second largest in terms of collection, and the only branch outside the main library equipped with a maker lab. I got this job by the grace of some benevolent god, and in part because I have a friend from college who worked in the maker lab that could vouch for my character. After a brief training period in the main library, I arrived for my first real day with a box of donuts for my coworkers in hand and a smile on my face at 6 in the morning. Unfortunately, my manager did not arrive on time. Enter the children's librarian, who did show up early to set up for story time and let my anxious butt inside. Enter our antagonist, who I will refer to as my least favorite character from Friends, Monica. Monica did not like me from the start. This is in part due to circumstances beyond my control, which I found out after the fact. One of her friends had applied to shelve at the library, but did not get the position because Monica's vouching did not carry as much weight as my friend's, as well as the fact that I was better qualified. She also did not like me because, and I cannot make this up, I brought donuts. See, she worked 2 jobs, one as a barista at the coffee shop and bakery across the parking lot, along with her job as a circulation assistant at the library. She was reportedly quite unhappy with my decision to bring donuts from a competing breakfast chain, while everyone else passed on her bagels. Side note, who even likes bagels, really? Fortunately for me, I didn't see much of Monica at this time. She worked a mid-shift since her mornings were at the coffee shop, so she was coming in when I was clocking out. This still didn't stop her from making sure I was aware of her disdain by taking up space in front of my work locker while she was coming on shift. So I would have a hard time getting my things and leaving in time to make my classes, or my second job. A few months passed, and around Christmas, a couple of our part-time branch assistants decided they were going to retire. This left us in a bind. We had 2 positions to fill, and we were coming up on holiday break, which is a busy time for the library. I had only been working in my position as a shelver since late summer, but something in me, read 4 shots of Jack Daniels at 2 a.m., led me to apply for the position anyway. Again, by the grace of some benevolent god and the recommendation of several people, I got the job. This is a good place to fit this in as well as any. My assistant manager was a good-natured sort of guy who had only started working in his position a couple of months before me. I was the first person he ever trained for both shelving and for an assistant position. The unfortunate truth was that my being trained by someone who was still in training himself showed. My ability to do my job was also hindered by Monica, who tried multiple times to sabotage me. She would tell me the wrong information or stay quiet if she knew I was misinformed. The problem was that this would backfire on her. Monica would tell me something untrue, and when I would be corrected, I never let her get away with it. Part of the reason I had gotten the position of circulation assistant is because I turned in a programming outline for a weekly anime club at the library. I know, I'm a nerd, but you're on Reddit, so... And it had been approved, but stalled in implementation. I was seen as a figure who could help revitalize our teen programming by our children's librarian. Another blow to Monica, who was in charge of the current programming for teens, which amounted to nothing more than an after-school study hall. Again, we were the second largest library branch in our system. We were expected to do better. Encroaching on her teens was nothing short of war, even though I pointed out she had other responsibilities that were piling up around the library that stagnated when she was doing her glorified babysitting. I also got chosen for assignments that made me popular with the library staff. When other branches were short-staffed, our branch would be asked if we could send some people to help pick up the shift. I was given this task quite a bit in the winter for a rather stupid reason. I drove a Jeep, and so my four-wheel drive was ideal for driving unplowed roads. Monica, in comparison, took public transport, so her chances of getting chosen were slim to zero. This also meant I picked up more friends at the other branches. What can I say? I'm charismatic. It helped that I wasn't on my phone all the time, something that Monica had been reprimanded for pretty regularly. I'm not talking a couple checks here and there throughout the hour. I'm talking every 5 minutes. Texting, checking Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, Vine, etc. She did it behind the desk, she did it in the back, she did it on the floor between the stacks, she did it checking in books, and part of the reason she loved watching the teens was because she could be on her phone practically uninterrupted for an hour and a half. At one point she lost her phone, used the library phone to call it, and then, when that didn't work, got on the phone with her sister to activate her "Where's my phone" feature from home, which meant we were slammed up front while she walked her sister through the process. Now that you have the background information and your FedEx order of Chekhov's guns, here's how this bee got our assistant manager fired. I processed a library card wrong. There was a patron who came in and through a series of wacky circumstances involving a former security action on him and a very generic milquetoast name, I mixed up some library accounts, put a new card on the wrong account, and then had to start a new application with a new card. All told, I spent half an hour getting this guy a card, and then had to go on my break immediately because I was 20 minutes from leaving and needed to get my 15 in before I left. In the rush, I left the dead library card on the counter. When I went back, it was gone. I panicked. I looked everywhere for it in the 10 minutes before I had to leave to go to class. I couldn't find it, and when I left, I was so consumed with anxiety about wondering where it went that I neglected to tell anyone what had happened. A big mistake, but anxiety is a hell of a drug. When I came into work a couple days later, I found out through an email it had been discovered, slotted back in with the other new unassigned library cards. I knew for darn sure that, of all the places I could have put it, it wouldn't have been there. I realized the person working at that computer when I had come back off my break was Monica. How does this translate to our assistant manager getting fired? Well, I had been the first and only assistant that he trained, since we hired our other assistant internally, and this was a capital big deal, so my F-up was a mark on his record as well as mine. It was around this point that I left the library. I was starting to get heat from my manager for some other unrelated issues involving mental health days, and I was promoted at the college writing center, making better pay. So I decided to cut my losses and leave. Apparently, they fired my assistant manager not long after, and he was forced to uproot his family, who had already moved so he could work at this job, and move to another state. Part of that was my F-up, I'll admit to that, but the majority of it was because it looked like I had hidden the card after the fact. Fast forward to January of 2018, and take the safety off those pew-pews. This is where we start getting wild. I'm scrolling through Twitter on my lunch break, and a notification pops that someone has liked a chain of tweets from almost 4 months earlier. That's weird in of itself, given I was very active on Twitter at this time, and those were buried by at least 500 more tweets. They were also about how I had talked to someone who worked at the library, and they had left soon after I did, and I was venting about poor leadership. It was very off-brand for my Twitter. I checked out who had liked them, and to my surprise, it was, of all people, Monica. I scrolled through her account and noticed some very interesting things. You see, the Twitter account she had used to like those tweets was a not safe for work BDSM account. Quelle surprise! I saw much more of Monica that day than I frankly ever wanted to see. But then I looked closer at some of the pictures, and despite wanting to use bleach for eye drops, I screen capped a couple and saved them on my laptop before going back to work. Later that day, I sent her a message through Facebook. To be honest, I wanted to know how she found me on Twitter. At that time, I wasn't using my real name, and I was posting a lot of incendiary things about the government, the kind of thing you want to stay anonymous for. In short, I was surprised she had tracked me down and needed to figure out where the leak was. When I approached her about it, she got nasty with me. She told me nobody cared about what I was writing, that I shouldn't talk crap about her work family, and that I only left the library because I couldn't hack it. Then she blocked me. So I was pissed. I remembered months of enduring abuse from her, how she'd blocked me from making teen programming better just because she wanted some time on her phone. how she'd gotten me in trouble and my boss fired over some petty BS, and all the other microaggressions too plentiful to list, and I decided, alright B, it's on. I went back online after taking a breath, and she must have realized her mistake because she had blocked me on Twitter and locked her account. That was fine by me because I had already gotten what I wanted. The pictures of her that I had saved, those were taken at the library. See, since we're a rather large branch, we have some pretty recognizable features in the library for anybody who's ever worked there or even walked inside. She had taken some pictures of herself topless in the back cubicles. There was one picture of herself in her underwear in the stacks, evident by the carpeting pattern, and, most damning, a picture of her flashing her butt with the children's section windows in the background. I gathered all these pictures up, wrote an email as a concerned anonymous patron to the HR department from a burner email, sent it, and sat back in wait. The effects were pretty darn immediate and started toppling like dominoes. She was fired in a record 2 days, and my friend in the Maker Lab told me she was escorted from the building. None of the other workers knew why, but word spread through the other branches because they had to bring people in to staff her position, which meant rotating cast of faces coming in and wondering why she'd been fired so immediately. Usually, even in firing people, the library would give them 2 weeks so the position could be filled. Eventually, someone subbing in must have had a contact in HR because that's when I started getting messages from literally everyone I ever worked with, all at the same time asking me, "Did you know Monica was making adult material in the library?" But remember that children's librarian who let me in on my first day and had recommended me for my promotion? And remember how Monica's other job was at the coffee shop across the parking lot? Well, after the incident with Monica and my assistant manager getting fired, that had a negative effect on my manager's record, so she was fired as well. As the librarian with the most seniority, the children's librarian was appointed interim manager. She had also heard the rumor about Monica, but wasn't aware of the details until she got access to those records as the new manager, and saw that Monica had taken pictures, and that some of those pictures were in the children's section, which she was, as you might imagine, fiercely protective of. As it just so happened, the owner of the coffee shop across the lot went to her church, so she found him after service and told him about why Monica had been fired from the library. Apparently, there had been a couple of incidences at her other job where she had disappeared into the walk-in with her phone, and some employees thought they saw her in compromising positions, but were never sure, so they could never take action on it. After being told about why she'd been fired from the library, and that she had been exposing herself again in the children's section where his grandkids play and pick out their books, he also fired her. But wait, there's more. Monica had also been doing well enough at the library and the coffee shop that she'd finally bought herself a car. Great news, except that once she lost both her jobs, she couldn't afford the payments. Trying to get a new job was also difficult, given that her past employers weren't shy about giving her bad references and explaining why she was fired. So her car got repossessed after she missed too many payments. She had also just applied to college where I was working, so she could get an English undergrad, then a master's in library sciences. She ended up having to withdraw since her scholarship was revoked after she was fired, and she no longer had a reliable way to get to campus. No job, no car, kicked out of college before she even took her first class. Could Monica's life get any worse? Oh, it could. Turns out, her boyfriend wasn't aware of her taking these pictures and posting nudes of herself on the internet. When he found out from one of her former coworkers at the library why she'd been fired, turns out she had lied to him about it. The two of them broke up, and guess where she had been living? So, she ended up moving back in with her mom, who I'm sure was really curious about why her daughter had been having such a streak of bad luck. Sorry, Monica. Looks like no one told you life was gonna be this way. Now, somebody down in the comments asked OP if they had confessed to the library card ordeal, and they said, yes, they probably should have clarified, but the post was already so long. I didn't know until after I had left my job that my mistake had caused problems for my assistant manager. But yes, I confessed to it. When I had come into work that day, I had already sent a text to my manager letting her know I needed to talk to her about something involving a library card. So she knew something was up even before it had been discovered. When I clocked in, she wasn't working yet, and I saw the email from another circulation assistant and knew, this is gonna be a crap day. And I wasn't wrong. I made it very clear to them that I didn't hide it, but that was difficult to prove given where they found it, and that I had left without saying anything. I couldn't exactly prove my coworker had taken it either, even though I was certain she had. Making the mistake was one thing, but hiding it seemed to be the tipping point. Also, not to badmouth my assistant manager, as he was a genuinely good guy, and he's good at his job where he is now. I'm pretty sure he's a full manager. Unfortunately, it wasn't as if the one strike had been the ball game. He had other problems too, from my understanding. It's a shame, really. I liked him a lot. Well, OP, you made a mistake, and mistakes happen, we understand that. But covering up a mistake or not saying something about it, that's probably where you went wrong. Now, OP, one last thing. I think you should provide a link to these photos of Monica, just for research purposes. Our next story today comes to us from a deleted account. Duplex destruction. Let's jump right in. A little over a year ago, I moved to a smallish town. I found a decent duplex on the outskirts, plenty of room for just myself. When I spoke to the landlord, or landlady I guess, she had implied that she'd had quite a few other people look at the place, but that these weren't the sort of people she wanted moving in. It was heavily implied, though never explicitly stated, that she wouldn't allow minorities to move into her duplexes. I really didn't care, as it was none of my business, and as long as I could get the place, I was happy. So I moved in a week later, and at first all was well. I worked Tuesday through Saturday, 8 to 5 every week, though I frequently get off later than 5. My job consists of driving a company truck and going to customers' houses to fix their crap. I sometimes deal with as many as 10 different people a day. At the end of the day, the only thing I usually want to do is go home and veg out in front of my computer. The last thing I want to do is interact with other people or have to deal with a bunch of noise. Unfortunately, my neighbor was running her own daycare next door, watching as many as 10 or 12 kids in her little 1,000 square foot unit. She would allow these kids to run wild. My typical Monday, which was one of my weekend days, would consist of waking up at about 7 a.m. to the sounds of kids banging on the walls and jumping on furniture and hearing my neighbor scream at the top of her lungs. This would go on all day until about 7 p.m. with no respite. Now, I knew when I moved in that she ran her own small daycare, but I didn't think it would be a problem. After all, I used to watch kids as well, only I was good at it, and I made sure the kids I watched were well behaved. Naturally, I assumed that someone running their own daycare would have the skills to control the kids. Not so. After a few weeks of this, I ended up losing my patience. I knocked on my neighbor's door and engaged her in small talk. I didn't want to immediately tell her to shut the F up, so I just made it seem like a friendly chat. During the small talk, I realized that this bee was nuts. This was the first time we'd ever talked, and within just a few minutes, she was telling me that she had an STD. I quickly forgot her name, but I always refer to her by the nickname I gave her, Crotch Rot. Well, after a few minutes of conversation with Crotch Rot, I decided to broach the subject of excessive noise. I started out by asking her if I was noisy, and assuring her that if I ever became noisy, she could ask and I would quiet down. She assured me that she never heard a peep from me. She then asked me if she was noisy, to which I replied that there was an awful lot of noise during the day while she was watching kids. Now, I'm still trying to keep things civil and friendly, but things are starting to go off the rails. She apologizes and tells me that running a daycare is a noisy business. She explains that this is her only source of income, and she has no choice in the matter. I ask her if she's able to keep the kids from banging on the walls at the very least, to which she replies that she's one person with 10 kids, and she can't be everywhere at once. At this point, I realize that being Mr. Nice Guy isn't working. This filthy bee is just going to keep making excuses and avoiding the issue rather than actually trying to do something about it. I suggest that she either hire on some help or take some lessons to learn to better deal with young children. She suggests I move somewhere else, and that it was stupid to move in when I knew the next door unit was a daycare. Well, at this point, I'm just pissed. This bee does a crappy job of running a daycare and handling children and has the nerve to call me stupid? I decide to go to war. Before going back into my own unit, I make one more statement. Do you have a license to run a daycare? Well, it turns out that Crotch Rot is good friends with Landlady, and at the beginning of the next month when Landlady comes to collect rent, she serves me an eviction notice, giving me 30 days to leave. Her explanation is that I'm causing tensions among the other tenants and being a troublemaker. Keep in mind, the only other tenant I've spoken to has been Crotch Rot. Well, neither of these bees know who they're effing with. I'm the last person to just bend over, especially when I feel that something unjust has been done. I do my research and learn about my state's childcare laws. I learn that there is a limit to how many children an unlicensed facility can care for, which is also based on how many caregivers there are. I also learned that there are certain requirements, such as state workers inspecting the facilities and doing background checks on the caregivers. All of that licensing information is public domain, so I do a search, and sure enough, my neighbor is unlicensed and illegally watching children. After that, I do some research on housing equality laws in my state. Turns out it's illegal for anyone, even a private owner, to discriminate against potential tenants on things like race, sex, religion, etc. First things first, I call up the Department of Child Protective Services and report my neighbor. I explain that she's unlicensed, that she's clearly unable to handle the children she's watching, and that I frequently hear banging and yelling coming from her unit, which has me concerned for the safety and well-being of the children. A bit of a fib there, but I figured I should spice it up a bit. Well, much to my surprise, it only takes about an hour before 2 CPS agents and a couple of police are pulling up in front of the duplex. They force Crotch Rot to call each of the parents to come pick up their children, then explain to the parents that if something were to happen to their children, that they could be held liable for leaving their children with someone who isn't equipped to handle them. Crotch Rot ends up getting slapped with a hefty fine and an order to appear in court. For the first time since I moved into that duplex, I was happy for the thin walls. I just sat there drinking a few beers and listening to all the chaos. It went on for hours. I slept like a baby that night. So, phase 1 of Operation Duplex Destruction was complete. Crotch Rot was ruined. I destroyed her only source of income permanently, caused her financial distress in the form of a fine, and got her in trouble with the law. It was time to proceed to phase 2. By now, most of my stuff was packed and I'd found a new place to live a few miles down the street. A couple weeks after moving to my new place, I invited a few of my coworkers over to have a few beers, though I had ulterior motives. It just so happens that I invited 2 black coworkers and a white coworker. After we'd had a couple of beers, I explained the real reason I wanted to get together. I'd been working on a plan to get back at some racist C of a landlady, and I was ready to put the plan into action. Fortunately, me being such a likable guy and on great terms with all my coworkers, they were more than happy to go along. I went ahead and had one of my black coworkers call up the landlady and ask about her for rent listing and set up a time to meet her and check the place out. I instructed my other black coworker to wait a couple days and do the same, and instructed my white coworker to wait until the end of the week to do the same. A week and a half came and went. During that time, all 3 of my coworkers had met with the landlady to check out the unit. She told my 2 black coworkers that she'd already found another tenant and sent each of them on their way. But when my white coworker showed up later that week, she told him that she hadn't found anyone to rent yet, but that she'd had some unsavory characters show interest. Well, this was more than enough for me. I got in touch with my state's Commission on Human Relations Department. I explained that I had referred a few friends to check the place out, and that the owner of the property was blatantly refusing to rent to minorities. I also called up the NAACP and explained the situation to them. It's now been about 2 months since all of that happened. I checked back with the NAACP this morning to ask for an update on the situation. Racist landlady was slapped with a fine and is currently being sued by the NAACP for tens of thousands of dollars. Operation Duplex Destruction is a success. This revenge was expertly executed. I mean, come on, get the evidence, give it to the various government agencies, sit back and watch the professionals get revenge for you. What else could be better? Our next story today comes to us from a deleted account. Revenge on cheating wife, now ex, as well as the karma that came afterwards. Let's jump right in. So, I am in the army and I was married. I was approaching my first deployment to Iraq. It was very stressful and it had my wife wanting me to find a way to stay and not deploy. Obvious things any wife would try to talk about. Anyways, so we have no kids but both want them, so we talk about getting out of debt while I'm gone. She talks to her best friend back home in another state where we are both from. Her friend agrees to let her move in and charge a modest $300 in rent so that we can get out of debt and start a family when I come back. A plan I was actually very pleased with. I deploy, she is there crying her eyes out saying she will miss me and loves me and we will start a family when we get back. Fast forward 2 months, she starts acting distant, not wanting to talk much on our scheduled calls or text back 1 or 2 word answers. We've been together 6 years. She is never at a loss for words. Anyway, one day she says, I need some space. She asks someone who is 10,000 miles away for space. I ask why. She says she just needs space. She wants to find herself. So I remember back when we lived at home, she had a guy who was always being borderline inappropriate. I'm not a very jealous person and I trust her. So I start seeing said guy in basically all her pictures she posts with the group. Every time he is in the picture, everyone else changes but never him. So for the first time, I'm very jealous and uneasy about everything. So I clone her phone so I receive every text she receives as well as every text she sends. I'll never forget the first text I saw after cloning her phone. Hey babe, I'll see you after work. Want me to save you any of my leftovers? From her to him, it destroyed me. I lost 35 pounds in a week. I didn't eat or sleep. I stared at the phone watching every conversation, watching them talk about trying to have a baby. It was literally everything a married person fears. I ask her if she's seeing someone and she says no she isn't. She is taking care of herself and she loves me blah blah. I don't say anything about receiving her texts for 2 months. Over this time, she finally admits cheating and that he is so much better than me at sex, treating her right, and he does what she wants. During this time, she pays our debt off, gets tattoos with him, matching I love you tattoos, goes to shows with him, buying clothes, etc. with the money I'm making. So this is where revenge starts. I put a freeze on the account for a month. In that time, I change every password to every account to things she won't guess. Army jargon, slang terms. I block her on Facebook and my phone so she has no way to contact me. She lost her car to repo a few months later, got kicked out of her place, had to sell her prized shoes and purses just to stay alive. I then find out she had got a job at her old restaurant. So I post all the text conversations I have with her and the guy talking about having babies that have timestamps on it as well as post conversations we had with the matching timestamps showing all of our friends what she has done. I then have friends call and complain at her job constantly on both him and her. They work at a restaurant, so I also have friends dine and dash. They both get fired. So she tries to call my command and tell them that I am abandoning her and she can't provide for herself. My commander knows what is going on. He does nothing because he had something similar happen. Then, about a month before I come back, she calls me from another number to tell me she is pregnant with his kid. Mind you, I'm still gone, so we cannot get divorced yet. She moved away with him 10 hours from me. April 24th, 2018. She calls me 5 months pregnant, crying uncontrollably, asks me where she should go. Apparently, they have a giant blow-up fight. She tells him she is leaving. She says she doesn't know where to go, and I simply say, sorry, not my problem anymore. Fast forward January of this year, she calls me from a mutual friend's phone. He hit me, I don't know what to do. Maybe you don't cheat on your husband when he is deployed for some guy who talks a big game. Well, I guess you are happy about this? No, but I'm glad I know I'm not the bad guy in this story. And then the next month, He's cheating on me with 2 girls. I'm sorry. I regret everything I did. I effed it all up. Yeah, you did. All in all, this woman destroyed my life, put me into a deep depression I'm still dealing with, but I do feel a little better having proof that I wasn't the problem. To think if this happened even 10 or 5 years ago, I would have come back to an empty bank account, an empty house, as well as seeing my then wife pregnant with another man's baby. She actually hit me up yesterday to ask for some money to help cover rent. So they split up, she had a baby with somebody else, and then she still asked you for rent money? I hope the answer was just complete silence or even laughter, because it's a joke, right? Our next story today comes to us from Deadly Gerbil. Bad landlord scams his tenants, goes to jail. Let's jump right in. Many years ago, when I worked for a rent-to-own company in a small town, there was a little apartment complex which we made frequent deliveries to, and just as frequently had to repo from. It had been a motel when it was built, and the owner turned it into apartments by just making doorways in the walls between rooms, putting a kitchen and a living room in one and a bedroom in the other. The place was very run down and apparently pretty inexpensive, and based on a few things customers said, it seemed that the majority of the tenants moved in there for short times. I figured it was because they were waiting for prefab houses to be financed and delivered, since the vast majority of housing in that town was mobile homes. Turns out I was wrong, but more on that later. Between deliveries and pickups, we were visiting this place multiple times per month, but the landlord wouldn't let us park the truck in the parking lot to do it. It was a motel parking lot, so there was way more space than the tenants needed, and plenty of room for our truck. But the minute we pulled into the lot, the landlord would come running out of the office and yell at us to get the truck off of his property. We were still allowed to deliver and such, we just had to carry the couches and old-style rear projection big screen TVs across the gravel lot from a truck parked on the street. It was more than a little annoying. Then the day came that I was visiting some customers, a young couple, to have them sign an extension because they couldn't make their payment, and I saw an eviction notice on their door. I knocked, they answered, and then they, too, saw the notice. They explained that they needed the extension because they were behind on rent, but the eviction was unexpected because they were only 2 days late. The notice gave them 1 week to move out. They signed the extension and I left. A little suspicious because that didn't seem right to me. A few days later, I got a call from the couple saying they needed to return the stuff they'd rented because they were being evicted and had to move to a motel. I told them to wait there, I'd be over in an hour. My wife had worked in the rental office of our previous apartment complex, so I knew some tenant laws. When I checked after getting the extension signed, I found that evictions couldn't be served with only a week notice. They had to give 30 days for the tenants to pay or move out. If they moved out, the landlord could take any unpaid rent out of their security deposit. This was a small town with lots of mobile homes, so I'm guessing the law was to prevent people being evicted from rented land on which they had a mobile home they owned, but it applied to apartments too. Normally, I'd have considered this none of my business, but everyone in our store hated that landlord and wanted to get back at him. So I printed out the applicable rental law pages from the town's website and drove over to the apartment complex. There, I knocked on the door of every one of our customers living there, which was about half of the 20 or so apartments, and gave them a copy of the law. While doing this, I learned that the landlord had been evicting people like that for being even a day late, then keeping their deposits, citing the very law I was giving to my customers, just not the part about 30 days leeway. He charged rent in advance. You paid for the next month at the end of each month. So people were losing their deposits over being 1 day late. On top of that, the landlord wouldn't accept late payments, even if they were before his scheduled eviction time, because he made more money by evicting people and moving someone new in since he kept all their deposits. I told the couple that had started all this that if I were them, I wouldn't move out, and I'd contact a lawyer or at least the city housing department and file a complaint. They were worried because the landlord had said he'd have the sheriff's department evict them if they didn't move out in time. There were no local police, small town, but I said that even if the landlord called them, I doubted they'd actually evict them if they cited the law. That was about all I could do, and I hoped it'd be enough. It was. The couple came in a few weeks later to pay for their rental furniture and to thank me for all of my help, telling me the landlord had just been arrested. They'd filed a complaint, and when the landlord called the sheriff to evict them, it had kicked off an investigation. I never learned what exactly the charges were or what happened to the landlord, but the complex ended up under new ownership, and the new manager had no problem with us parking on their property for deliveries. Also, the number of our repos and deliveries there suddenly dropped because people were no longer being evicted constantly. Between that experience and other stories I've read online, I never cease to be baffled and annoyed that people don't know their rights as tenants. Check your laws, don't take a landlord's word for anything, and stand up for yourself. If people would take some time to educate themselves a little bit more on things like tenant laws, there would be a lot less problems with landlords like this in the future. Your best defense is a good offense, and you can't put up a good offense unless you know what you're talking about. So I implore you, if you're somebody who is renting right now, make sure you check out what your tenant laws are in your particular area. You never know when you might need them, or you might even be getting screwed now and just not know it. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.